The deadly cycle of violence in Israel shows no signs of ending. Now, the international community has begun an effort to try and bring peace to the region. Today, the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting, and President Obama said he is sending Secretary of State John Kerry to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms violence directed against innocent people, and believe that Israel has a right to maintain basic law and order and protect its citizens from knife attacks and violence on the streets.
Earlier today, Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas condemned an attack by Palestinians on a Jewish religious site known as Joseph's Tomb. But Israelis and Palestinians continue to blame each other for the violence. Al Jazeera's Kristen Salumi has more.
The Security Council got a briefing from Assistant Secretary General Tay Zerahoun, who blamed both sides in the conflict for making reckless statements. He said he welcomed comments from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that there would be no changes to access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But he criticized what he described as the heavy-handed response of Israeli security forces. The Palestinian ambassador said that his people had little trust that Israel would live up to that promise to maintain the status quo.
If there is an international presence around Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to guarantee that the status quo to be maintained, I think that that is what is in the mind of members of the Security Council. That is in our mind.
The facts speak for themselves. For decades, Israel has maintained the status quo and will keep on doing so. Let me be crystal clear. Israel will not agree to any international presence on the Temple Mount. Such a presence would be a change in the status quo.
Now, there were many calls from Security Council members to end the violence and end provocative acts, but right now there seems to be little appetite for implementing the kind of monitoring force that the Palestinians have been talking about.
With Kristen Salumi at the United Nations. Nuclear-armed North Korea has threatened the U.S. and South Korea many times, so it was no surprise the nation was number one on the agenda when President Obama met with South Korea's president at the White House today. National security correspondent Jamie McIntyre has more.
Antonio, North Korea has been doing a lot of nuclear saber-rattling recently, threatening both the United States and South Korea with its nuclear arsenal. But tensions have eased a bit recently, and today President Obama indicated he's willing to negotiate with Pyongyang, but only if it's serious about giving up its nuclear weapons. The meeting between South Korean President Park and President Obama and his national security team comes as North Korea has been issuing increasingly aggressive statements. And amid signs Pyongyang may be planning a space launch or nuclear test explosion in defiance of UN Security Council resolutions. The two presidents jointly expressed deep concern about the North's intentions.
Today, President Park and I are reaffirming that our nations will never accept North Korea as a nuclear weapons state.
South Korea's president raised eyebrows last month when she attended China's massive military parade in Beijing, an event the U.S. and many other countries boycotted. But President Park says her intention was to win Chinese cooperation in pressuring North Korea to give up its nuclear ambitions.
So that was my message that I had for the leaders that I met in Beijing, and they agreed with me in terms of my remarks about North Korea's nuclear problems. And we all agreed we needed to make efforts to resolve this issue.
But Park's overture to China also made Seoul reluctant to accept new U.S. missile defenses that Beijing opposes. Given North Korea's claim to have nuclear weapons that can fit atop a long-range missile, the U.S. would like to deploy the THAAD system, short for Tactical High-Altitude Area Defense, to give the U.S. military the ability to shoot down North Korean missiles before they reach their highest speed. South Korea has so far not agreed to the deployment, but President Obama insists there is no contradiction between the Republic of Korea having good relations with both the U.S. and China.
I don't see any cracks in the relationship at all. I would argue that the U.S. ROK relationship is stronger than it's ever been.
The U.S. has almost 30,000 troops stationed in South Korea and is bound by treaty to defend the South if it is ever attacked by the North, because the Korean War is not officially over, ending as it did in 1953 with an armistice, not a peace treaty. President Obama says his record on Iran and Cuba shows that he's willing to engage with countries that have, in his words, a troubled history with the United States. But so far there isn't a shred of evidence that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has any interest in taking up the president's offer. Antonio?
Jamie McIntyre at the White House. 5 people were killed when a gunman opened fire on a religious gathering in eastern Saudi Arabia. It happened in the coastal city of Sayhat. A new branch of ISIL is reportedly claiming responsibility. 1 woman was among the dead, another 9 people were injured. The people who had gathered were all members of the Shia Muslim minority. Saudi media is reporting the gunman was wearing an explosives belt but was killed before he could detonate them. Police in Malaysia have arrested a hacker accused of stealing personal information for more than 1,300 U.S. military personnel and federal employees and then handing that data to ISIL. The U.S. Justice Department says 20-year-old Ardit Farizi is a known hacker from Kosovo. Police say he arrived in Malaysia last year to study computer science and forensics. He will be extradited to the U.S. to face charges. A day after President Obama announced he plans to delay the planned withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, Germany made the same announcement. The country's defense ministry says it will keep troop levels in Afghanistan at the same level for the time being. Germany has less than 1,000 troops in the country as part of NATO's mission. But as Jennifer Glass reports, many Afghans say it's time for all foreign troops to go home.